Good morning and welcome to another episode of Back to the Past. Here I am in what will be my living quarters here shortly. And I'm working today on flooring, and I'm using a vinyl snap together flooring that I used on another project. And it looks pretty good. It goes together pretty easily. It's completely waterproof, which is going to be important around here because I have a dog that'll be coming in with wet feet. I'll be coming in with wet feet, and I don't want this to expand and contract. And actually, for essentially a plastic floor, it actually has a good wood-like look to it. So that I really like. So the most important thing about doing a snap together floor, or really any kind of flooring, is your layout. You want to start in the right place or you're not going to end in the right place. Now, for a normal room that you've got no obstacles or anything else to plan around, you probably want about the same size piece on one edge as you do on the other edge. This room is 20 feet across, so that isn't all that critical, but one thing that is critical for me is the doorway into the bathroom, which will essentially get more traffic than anywhere else in the building. So that I want to have a fairly large piece. I sure don't want to end up with a little 2-inch piece that can easily pop out. I want something that's going to be pretty secure where it is. So that's what I did the layout on this floor from, is coming into the bathroom with a 6-inch wide board so that I've got some good stability there. So we'll take a look at that, and then I'll put the camera back where it is and we'll get started on doing some layout work. Okay, so what I'm after here is a random layout on the ends of these boards. They're all 4 feet long, so whatever I end up in one spot is going to pretty much be that way all the way across. Now, in doing a random layout, that sort of matches the way that typical hardwood flooring is done, because that is done in random widths and lengths. So, in order to stay somewhat random looking, which is actually harder than it sounds because you don't want a pattern to develop over the layout of the floor. So for my next one, excuse me, Gab, you're going to have to move there, but okay. So for the next one, I am looking at a board that will either end about here, or maybe even better yet, about here, to keep that random look. We don't want them to be exactly in line with anything within 4 or 5 feet, so I wouldn't want it to be exactly there and have it match up with something that I don't want. So I try to keep from my cutoffs kind of a variety of pieces left here, so we can start out by looking at pieces that I already have. So we have a piece that would be like that, or a piece that would be like that, and probably either of these would work just fine for starting my layout on the next piece. In fact, I've got a third one that we can look at. And that one may be even a little bit better. So I think what I'll do is I'll start the next row with that piece right there. Now with these boards, what we do is to set it approximately in the groove about where it'll go at a 45-degree angle, slide it over until it butts into the one beside it, and then coming down, I sort of jiggle it in place, and usually that works. Now sometimes it doesn't, and what their directions say is, if it doesn't, is you can place another board against it so you don't ruin this tongue on the where it snaps together, and do a little bit of tapping. Now, this is supposed to be done with a rubber mallet, but I'm in Arkansas and my rubber mallet is in Colorado, so I've got to use another method. Then to get these ends to snap together, I just got a scrap of board here, rubber on one side and then the hard surface on the other side, and put it on the joint. And that snaps it together. And we're ready for the next board. And forgive me for calling these boards because they're actually made out of plastic. Board is easier to say. Now here's one that isn't jiggling quite as well. We'll give it a tap. And I'll go ahead and look at what's going to work well for the next row. And actually, I think this short piece that we looked at earlier will work just fine. And you want to leave about 1/4 of an inch on each end. This material will expand and contract some depending on temperature. And although indoors you're typically going to have a fairly stable temperature, it's going to vary some. So there will be some movement to the floor that you want to allow for. All right, for starting my next row, I don't have anything that is a leftover piece from an end cut that looks very well because it lines up pretty closely with this joint here. So I'm going to want to create something here in an approximate length that shouldn't look too bad. And I think what I'll do is I'll start out with a fairly short one. Actually, maybe only a couple inches. Maybe I'll start out with maybe a 3-inch piece on that side. And then I'll come here to this side, measure what I need here, which is going to be 33 3/8. So I'll go down and cut these two pieces. Now, with a lot of this vinyl flooring, and even with this stuff, it says to cut it, just score it with a sharp knife and break it. Score it several times. Usually they say to do it to break it, but I found that to even break a little bit crooked or have a corner break off or something like that. And if it's covered by trim, maybe or maybe not, that won't show. But I've decided that what I want to do with all of my cut joints is to just go downstairs to my saw and saw them down there. So that's what I'll do. I'll cut this one 33 3/8, I believe is what I said. And then a 3-incher for that end. And I'll bring up the extra pieces and see if they'll work then for starting the next course. All right, I've got in about 110 square feet so far, and this is my first piece of scrap that I'll end up throwing away. I utilize these end pieces. Typically, I try to cut them off at less than 4 inches, but when you figure out, probably a 1/4 of a square foot of waste on 100 square feet of flooring, that's pretty doggone good. So you can do this random layout and still come out with very little scrap. Now, as we had talked about before, this is one area where I would like to have one continuous piece across that doorway. There can be a joint in the middle, but it can lead to problems later, so I don't want that to happen. So what I'll look at is I started out with a full piece there, and these are just barely held together to see where a joint would come out. And as you can see, it comes out in a not very appealing place. It's pretty close both to the board right before it and then another 3 back. So Ideally, I'd probably want a joint just about here somewhere. So what I'll do is I'll measure that and I'll cut off about 12 inches from the other end of my starter piece. Now, the one thing about this flooring is if I'm looking at it from this perspective, you always have to work left to right. If I'm working from the position of already being on the flooring, then I've got to work from right to left. You got no choice in that. That's something that you have to do with this type of flooring. So I'll go down and get that first piece cut, and we'll see where we come out. I don't know how easy it is to see my original layout line here, but that 7 1/8 inch calculation worked out to be just about perfect. See what it looks like on the other end. Pretty much the same thing there. So these boards are just about exactly where I want them to be. Now, in the last project that I did before I retired, I put in this type of floor in 6 offices and a hallway, and I had to start on the far end of the offices, which were about 15 feet long. The one thing that the engineer really wanted was to be able to run the boards in the direction that we're looking at here, coming back toward the hallway, and then have all the doorways work out to where they are all properly jointed together into the hallway. So that meant a layout within a 32nd of an inch, and depending on all these boards being manufactured just exactly the same. And it ended up that it worked out on that project. The next thing that I need to be concerned about, I've got a piece laying in here temporarily. It's easy enough to lay out the position of the door for that first piece, but then also, as you can see here, there's going to be have to be an edge cut off. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and snap a few more boards together to where I can measure and see just exactly what I'm going to need for the width of the pieces. Okay, I've snapped a few boards together here, and you can see we've got a space to fill there. That's going to mean a cut board. This is the board that I'll start with, and I've got it laid out for my cuts for the end. Now I have to measure for a width. I don't know that I'm going to be able to do that holding the camera at the same time, so I'm going to have to shut down for a moment. Okay, my cuts now are marked. That corner will come out. I've got a cut of about 5/8 of an inch all the way along that edge, and that corner will come out. Now, the one other benefit to having this as being a fairly wide piece is there's about 1/8 of an inch difference in width here that there is there. And if you look at it when there's just a little tiny 5/8 or 3/4 of an inch cut, it's pretty noticeable. But once we get that cut and set in place, the difference of 1/8 of an inch across 6.5 inches really won't even show. Okay, it looks like this is going to work. The one thing that maybe is a bit of a concern is that this material is quite a bit thinner than what the tile and its underlayment is. So I'm going to need to bring this up about 1/4 of an inch, and I think what I'll do is I'll use thin set underneath this piece. So I'll go ahead and spread some thin set, and then I've got some outdoor things that I need to get done today. So what I'll do is I'll come back in a couple hours and go ahead and set this piece. It looks like everything's going to join up properly, so I should be in good shape. All right, I got filled in around this doorway, and even though I tried to level at about 5/16 of an inch, I built it up, it still isn't enough. So I think what I'll do is I'll get maybe an aluminum bronze colored threshold. If I can get one especially that's narrow, maybe 1.5 inches or 2 inches wide would work just fine, I think. And I think I could do that without having to trim off the bottom of the bathroom door. I'm hoping anyway. So I'm ready to continue. I'm about half finished, I guess, now, and I'll just keep plugging away at it. Okay, well, I am up to the main entrance doorway now. I'm getting kind of sore. I want to hit that with a fresh mind, so I'm going to do it tomorrow. I'm not going to be starting early. I need a new set of tires for my truck. I need to go into Fayetteville to get that taken care of in the morning. I need to do laundry. I may not get started back on this until noon, but hopefully I can get it finished tomorrow. We'll find out and see you then. I now have flooring finished in here. It's starting to look a lot more like home all the time. So much so, in fact, I think I'm going to start moving into here and maybe have my first overnight tomorrow night. There's still things to be done, but most of what needs to be done isn't going to create a lot of dust and shouldn't be too hard to take care of. The exception to that might be drywalling this partial south wall. That can't be done until I'm finished with the scaffold on the outside because I have brackets that go through the wall right now. And that's actually fairly low on my priority list. I've got a nice level floor in here, which I don't in the cabin. I have nice temperature control in here, which I don't in the cabin. I've got lights, I've got a fan, I have access to internet. I'll have to move my television, microwave, and that sort of stuff, my cooking things in. But then I think I'll be feeling much at home. Be able to sit here in front of the window, pull up a chair, drink a beer, watch traffic go by, watch the songbirds, listen to the songbirds. Maybe an occasional deer will pass by, and I think I'm just really going to enjoy it. My next priority will be getting running water in here, and it's been too wet to dig outside, but it's finally drying up a little. Supposed to be more rain coming in tomorrow night, so that might mess up my plans. But I want to try to get the water line into the well house as soon as I can. And I still have a gas line to dig, which isn't going to happen this week. It probably won't even happen next week. And I may have to run to Colorado, so it may be several weeks before I actually have hot water in here. But that's okay. I don't have that in the cabin either. I'll see you on the next episode. Thank you for joining me. Goodbye.